It's Tuesday, 10 December. Welcome to the President's Daily Brief. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. All right, let's get briefed. We begin in Syria, where newly discovered evidence exposes the true depths of former President Assad's brutality. Prisoners are emerging from dungeons described as, quote, human slaughterhouses, painting a grim picture of his regime's darkest crimes. Later in the show, millions of Syrian refugees celebrate the collapse of Assad's regime, while some European nations begin to freeze asylum applications, citing uncertainty over Syria's political future. Plus, an update from South Korea. The nation's president has been barred from traveling overseas following last week's controversial martial law decree. And in today's Back of the Brief, a 26-year-old man is arrested for the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Luigi Mangione's arrest ends the large-scale manhunt for last week's assassination on the streets of New York City. But first, today's PDB Spotlight. We'll begin in Syria, where a full picture of the brutality of the Assad regime is beginning to emerge as prisoners are released from infamous dungeons described as, quote, human slaughterhouses. As PDB faithful listeners are no doubt aware, the regime of President Bashar al-Assad was toppled by a coalition of Islamist rebels on Sunday, bringing a swift and very surprising end to one of the world's longest-running family dictatorships. The insurgents managed to sweep across the country in just 10 days to evict the Assad family after 50 years ruling over Syria, a reign marked by the violent oppression of political dissidents and average citizens alike. As they advanced towards Damascus, the rebels began freeing prisoners from the country's detention centers, some of whom were marked for execution, assuring them that the regime would soon fall and that they were now safe. Many were seen running through the streets in celebration and screaming in joy on Sunday when news of Assad's ousting swept through the country, that's according to a report from the Associated Press. Now, with Assad driven into asylum in Russia, the rebels, alongside Syrian relief workers, are working to clear out the roughly 100 prison facilities scattered across the country and working to find the location of any secret detention centers used by the regime, where many prisoners are still believed to be trapped. The prisons, described by the families of detainees as, quote, dungeons, death camps, and human slaughterhouses, have long stood as a reminder of the violent consequences that faced those opposing the Assad regime. The harsh conditions were infamous, with human rights groups reporting systematic torture and secret executions overseen by Syrian intelligence. Now, to say that day-to-day life at these prisons was horrific is, well, obviously it's an understatement. In 2013, a Syrian military defector known as Caesar smuggled out more than 53,000 photographs taken at the facilities that he then gave to international human rights groups and Syrian activists. An analysis of the photographs proved that at least 6,700 people had died while in the government's custody, and that was just back in 2013, just 2 years into the Civil War. Some were executed in mass hangings, while others were tortured to death by being deprived of food, water, and medicine. Their bodies would then be dumped into mass graves. Disease was also said to be rampant inside these facilities, accounting for an unknown number of deaths. Prisoners were also regularly subjected to severe beatings, electrocution, sexual assaults, and medieval torture methods. Amnesty International has long highlighted the torture, executions, and prison conditions as crimes against humanity. At just one military prison north of Damascus, Amnesty International estimates that as many as 13,000 people were killed between 2011 and 2016. All told, observers estimate that nearly 158,000 Syrians were arrested between March 2011 and August 2024 and placed in detention. Of those, more than 5,000 were children and more than 10,000 were women. The Assad regime's security apparatus and prisons were designed not only to isolate Syrian dissidents, but also to instill fear among the wider population. An analyst at the London think tank Chatham House told the Associated Press, quote, anxiety about being thrown in one of Assad's notorious prisons created wide mistrust among Syrians. Assad nurtured this culture of fear to maintain control and crush political opposition, end quote. Now, as of Monday, the British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported that tens of thousands of political prisoners have been freed from Aleppo in the north down to Damascus in the south. But relief groups say there are still countless prisoners trapped in underground dungeons. They've called on former soldiers and prison guards to provide the rebels with passwords to unlock underground electronic doors and offered monetary rewards for information that helps uncover the remaining secret facilities. All right, coming up next, Syrian refugees celebrate Assad's fall as Europe freezes their asylum applications, and South Korea's president faces a travel ban after a controversial martial law decree. Okay, well, to be fair, most martial law decrees are considered controversial. I'll have those stories when we come back. Welcome back to the PDB. Sticking with the fallout from Syria, I want to take a look at how victims of the Assad regime are reacting to news of the dictator's demise, even as some European nations begin freezing asylum applications for new refugees. Refugees of the Syrian civil war have been taking to the streets across Europe since Sunday to celebrate the end of Assad's decades-long authoritarian rule, waving flags and singing songs to mark the historic power shift. Thousands rallied in Berlin, home to the largest Syrian community in Europe, as well as in Athens, London, and Vienna, that's according to a report from France 24. Rallygoers could be seen carrying signs reading Free Syria while honking horns and shouting Allahu Akbar or God is great. One participant who fled Aleppo in 2015 said the general feeling among refugees was one of relief and expressed hope that Assad and his cronies will ultimately face justice. He said, quote, 10 years ago, I was in Syria and saw things no one should have to see, things that are impossible to wipe from your memory. Assad is the worst terrorist imaginable, end quote. Others echoed these sentiments and called for Assad to be tried by the International Criminal Court in The Hague for the many war crimes committed against his own people. Assad, as we've reported, fled to Moscow over the weekend after being granted asylum by the Russian government, a key ally of his regime, of course, during the civil war. No word on where exactly Assad and his family are currently staying. I don't know, maybe they're staying at Putin's place in a guest suite. I can just see Assad padding around Putin's kitchen in the morning in his boxers, asking Vladimir where he keeps the coffee. Now, the Russian government, with a straight face, said they gave Assad asylum for humanitarian reasons. Seems like it would have been more humanitarian to hand him over to the Syrian people. I mean, they freed up room in their prison system, so he'd have accommodations. The Civil War, which broke out in 2011, drove more than 14 million Syrians from their homes over 13 years of fighting, with more than 5 million fleeing as refugees to neighboring countries in the Middle East as well as Europe. There are reportedly 3 million refugees in Turkey alone, and another million or so in Lebanon. Germany became the biggest non-neighboring host country for those fleeing the violence, with an estimated 850,000 Syrian refugees living there as of 2024. Now, many said they hope they can soon return to their war-torn country to begin the process of rebuilding, though expressed concern about what kind of government will take its place. The rebels, frankly, are a coalition of Islamist groups led by a former al-Qaeda operative. While the rebel leader recently claimed he planned to replace the regime with a pluralistic government, many, of course, have questioned whether his rebranding as a moderate is authentic. And that should be known in relatively short order. Some European countries are already making changes to their asylum policies regarding Syria, particularly due to concerns over the extremist ties within the rebel coalition. On Monday, Germany's Federal Office for Migration and Refugees placed a hold on asylum applications from Syria, a decision that affects roughly 48,000 active asylum cases. The governments of Austria, Belgium, Italy, Greece, and the Netherlands all promptly followed suit, citing uncertainty over Syria's political future. Officials in the UK also said they plan to stop processing applications for Syrian refugees. Austria, home to some 100,000 Syrian refugees, went further than most, with their interior minister announcing plans to begin targeted deportations of Syrian migrants. National security concerns are also a major consideration. A senior German politician warned that Germany and the rest of Europe can't ignore the rebel coalition's close ties to radicals, particularly their links to Afghanistan and the Taliban. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz expressed cautious optimism about the collapse of the Assad regime, but said his country will be keenly watching to see what fills the void. Scholz said, quote, "We will judge the future rulers by whether they make it possible for all Syrians to live in dignity and self-determination and live in peace with their neighbors," end quote. Okay, Turning to South Korea, the Justice Ministry has imposed an overseas travel ban on President Yoon Suk-yeol as authorities investigate allegations of rebellion tied to his abrupt declaration of martial law just last week. That was a move that plunged the country, of course, into political chaos. The travel restriction was announced Monday, with the Justice Ministry's spokesperson confirming the decision was based on requests from police, prosecutors, and an anti-corruption agency. This step comes as Yoon faces mounting legal challenges, while sitting presidents are generally immune from prosecution in South Korea. Allegations of rebellion or treason are key exceptions. According to a briefing shared with the Associated Press, a senior National Police Agency officer told reporters Monday that Yoon could be detained if legal conditions are met. Observers doubt police will detain Yoon, though, due to potential clashes with his presidential security, which is also unlikely to allow office searches without approval, citing laws protecting state secret sites. As we've been tracking on the PDB, Yoon's declaration of martial law on the 3rd of December, which saw special forces deployed into Seoul for 6 tense hours, sparked outrage domestically and drew international criticism. The opposition-controlled National Assembly swiftly overturned the decree early Wednesday, labeling it a, quote, unconstitutional and illegal rebellion. Opposition lawmakers and the Democratic Party are now preparing a new impeachment motion after Yoon narrowly survived the vote on Saturday, as most governing lawmakers boycotted the vote. The fallout from Yoon's declaration has already engulfed senior officials. The country's former defense minister, who reportedly advocated for the decree, was detained on Sunday, marking the first arrest in the case. Additionally, 3 top military commanders have been suspended, while opposition lawmakers have filed formal complaints against Yoon and other key figures. In a televised apology on Saturday, Yoon acknowledged responsibility for the martial law declaration, but announced plans to step back from state affairs, deferring political decisions to his conservative People Power Party. Now, the leader of that party confirmed the arrangement, but critics argue it sidesteps constitutional norms. Despite relinquishing some duties, Yoon notably retains command of South Korea's military, as the Defense Ministry confirmed on Monday, and that's a power explicitly reserved for the presidency under the Constitution. Yoon's justification for martial law, including accusations that Parliament is a, quote, den of criminals, well, it's Parliament after all, and a haven for, quote, anti-state forces, has only deepened the divide with South Korea's liberal-leaning legislature. His administration has faced repeated clashes with Parliament since he took office in 2022, with liberal lawmakers introducing impeachment motions and launching investigations into multiple scandals. Now, experts warn that the PPP's decision to shield Yoon from impeachment could backfire, stoking public protests and further eroding trust in his leadership. As investigations and impeachment efforts continue, Yoon's presidency faces, well, unprecedented uncertainty, with opposition parties pushing impeachment and his own party scrambling to restore public confidence. The political storm enveloping Seoul shows no signs of fading. All right, coming up next in the back of the brief, the suspect in the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson is revealed as 26-year-old Luigi Mangione, an Ivy League-educated tech bro from Maryland. I'll be right back. In today's back of the brief, the nationwide manhunt for United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson's suspected killer has ended with the arrest of 26-year-old Luigi Mangione, an Ivy League graduate whose radical anti-capitalist ideology culminated in a brazen act of violence. A native of Maryland, Mangione was apprehended Monday morning at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania, after an employee recognized him and tipped off authorities. Local police recovered a 9mm ghost gun, which is an unserialized and therefore untraceable firearm, equipped with a silencer along with 4 fake IDs and a U.S. passport, marking the end of a tense, multi-state pursuit that began following last week's high-profile Manhattan shooting. At the time of his arrest, Mangione was found with a 2.5-page handwritten manifesto declaring, quote, "These parasites had it coming," end quote. Law enforcement sources told the New York Post that the manifesto, likened to the writings of Unabomber Ted Kaczynski, whose quotes Mangione endorsed online, provides insight into his escalating discontent with modern society and the healthcare industry. Officials confirmed Mangione acted alone in the attack, though he notably has not yet been charged in Thompson's killing. While the manifesto reveals a deep ideological motivation, authorities are also exploring personal grievances that may have driven Mangione's animosity toward the healthcare system. According to the Post, online obituaries reveal he lost his grandmother in 2013 and his grandfather in 2017, while records show he briefly worked at an assisted living facility in 2014, while speculation these experiences may have shaped his path toward violence. Mangione's academic and professional trajectory paints a startling contrast to his actions. Once a valedictorian and a University of Pennsylvania graduate with dual degrees in engineering and computer science, well, he appeared destined for a promising future. Sources report he excelled academically and worked most recently as a data engineer. However, his online activity reveals a darker transformation, with posts dating back to 2019 criticizing capitalism, the healthcare system, and government policies. Investigators believe Mangione's case reflects the dangerous intersection of personal loss and ideological extremism. Investigators are now combing through his digital footprint to uncover more about the motivations behind his alleged crimes and the events leading up to the attack. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Tuesday, 10 December. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. And of course, as you've probably seen on billboards scattered around town, to listen to the show ad-free, well, it's simple. Become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by visiting pdbpremium.com. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.